Hey everybody, two Alpha Gals here. I'm Debbie Nichols.
And I'm Candace Mathis, and you're listening to In the Tall Grass, where we're sharing stories of reinvention, resilience, and rediscovering joy.
Whether it's facing Alpha Gal syndrome or any other redefining chapter of life, we all have to learn how to navigate the journey through the tall grass. So here we go. This episode is sponsored by Insect Shield. One of the mottos we live by is don't live in fear, live aware. Well, Insect Shield is one of the companies helping us to do just that. Insect Shield's EPA-registered insect repellent apparel makes it easy to protect yourself from insects that could potentially cause disease.
But did you know the company has a program to insect shield your own clothes? You send your clothes in, Insect Shield treats them and sends them back to you with durable and effective protection against not just ticks, but also mosquitoes and other biting insects. Check out insectshield.com for more info. And you can save 15% on your first purchase and support 2 Alpha Gals today with code 2AlphaGals. That's TWO Alpha Gals. Hey, everybody. So we are so excited today to have Mary Collins, who is the Vice President of Business Development at Insect Shield, here with us. So thank you so much, Mary, for being with us today.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. So let's just dive into it. Can you just share a little bit about who you are with our listeners?
Sure thing. So hi, I'm Mary Collins with Insect Shield. I am the Vice President of Business Development. I have been with Insect Shield since 2007, but I have a longer history with Insect Shield than that. In 2003, when Insect Shield got its original EPA registration, I was with a company called ExOfficio, and we made outdoor travel clothing. And we were actually the first company to ever work with Insect Shield and sell insect repellent treated apparel in the market in the US. And 2003 is when when Insect Shield got its original EPA registration, so it all tied together. So I've basically been involved in the insect repellent clothing market since it launched, since its whole time in the US. In 2003. And so in 2007, I went to work exclusively with Insect Shield. And my background itself is in textiles and apparel. And one thing I loved about Insect Shield, both with working primarily just for Insect Shield and even with ExOfficio, it's about functional clothing and clothing that can do more than just be clothing. We all have to wear clothes, but there are things that your clothing can do to help you stay protected from insects or to be protected from the sun, or if you're a firefighter, to help protect you from fires, or if you're, many different things that clothing can do. And I just find that fascinating. So even though I'm with the textile, my background's textiles, but the connection of Insect Shield, which really is a truly functional product beyond just being covering your body, and hopefully you look good while you're doing it. But that's my background with Insect Shield. So yeah, basically in the insect repellent clothing market for 20 years now.
Oh, wow. That's a long time. And, it's funny because I hadn't really thought about the functionality of clothing, right? We think about clothes to stay warm, clothes to stay cool, clothes to stay dry. But as you're talking about this, I'm thinking, my husband did a little bit of car racing and he would have to wear the fire resistant clothing, but it kind of all like it's a whole category of things, isn't it? And so Insect Shield is providing something that is really important for people like me and Candace who really need to avoid being bitten by ticks. Is that all you do? What in a nutshell, what does Insect Shield do? You provide these pieces of clothing that are repellent.
Yeah, so basically what we do, so Insect Shield, we bond, the repellent that we use is called permethrin. Permethrin has been on the market since the mid 70s. You can buy, and you've been able to buy permethrin and spray your own clothes. Permethrin itself is actually a synthetic derivative of a repellent found in the chrysanthemum flower. So the chrysanthemum flower, there are certain types of it that repel insects. Permethrin is part of the pyrethroid family, and they were basically made in the lab because you can only farm so much chrysanthemum flower essence to, attach to product and to use commercially. So we bond the permethrin to the fabric fibers. With the EPA registration, we can claim repellency for mosquitoes, ticks, flies, ants, chiggers, and midges. So the EPA, we're actually the only clothing finish that is EPA registered. Like you'll find there's a lot of different clothing finishes. Obviously there's UPF, Teflon, type of finishes, moisture wicking, but insect repellent falls under the EPA. So the EPA considers an insect shield treated item to be first a repellent item and then a piece of clothing. So that's why on an insect shield item, you'll actually find sort of like the back of the bottle type of labeling. Like, we have, here's a pair of socks. Like you see, this is what you'd see on the back. So maybe of a bottle if you bought, a can of spray. The difference with Insect Shield and bonding the repellent into the fabric fibers is that's actually the only repellent on the market that has no warning or caution. Any liquid repellent you use has a warning or caution because it can be misused, whereby our treated product, we bond it in. So there's no way to misuse. You can't overuse your socks. You can't, you don't have to reapply. There's no danger of someone like taking the bottle and a child going, oh, what's this? And let me swallow it, or it gets in their eyes. There's none of that. So it really is a different way of looking at insect repellent and protection.
I did not know that about, the difference in the repellents. I mean, clearly you hear about DEET a lot and how toxic it is, right? Can you explain a little bit more about EPA and the EPA registration? Like, what does EPA stand for?
Yeah, sure. So the EPA is the Environmental Protection Agency, and their mission for products that are registered are to make sure they're basically safe for humans to use, or actually, and animals can be also safe to be used by live, things, and also in the environment. So they're looking at both of those when you get the registration. So that's why they're different ratings. So there's 4 categories of EPA registration, and you can actually know what category it is by if you're looking at the back of a can. I think it's, there's danger, warning, caution, or something like ours that has no specific safety rules with it. So a caution, and we actually do with our permethrin spray, which I'll grab right here. This falls under caution. So basically a caution is the next level down after there's none, caution, warning, danger. So within caution, it's just saying, basic things like it's a liquid and there's, it's a chemical. So don't get it in your eyes, don't swallow it. But so the process to get the EPA registration is quite intense, especially because we were the first in the category. So it's multitudes of studies. We have biomonitoring studies to check, if any of the permethrin is transferred onto the skin, if, when you're doing activity, if someone is wearing Insect Shield and they sweat, is there added, permethrin or, different abrasion that's happening that could be, deemed unsafe. So there's testing to make sure it's safe for the people, and then testing to make sure that the process itself and how we're applying the permethrin onto the product is also safe. So our apparel is registered to last through 70 washes. And in the world of textiles, that's considered really the life of a garment. We all have those items we've washed, that favorite t-shirt, and you've washed it well more than 70 times, but in that t-shirt, there's like those thin spots. And basically you're losing fibers. So within the saying the permethrin, the Insect Shield lasts through 70 washes, basically they're like, by the time you get to 70 washes, you've just lost a lot of fiber. So it's not like it's not leaching out. It's just that it's been used, and it's like what's in your lint tray that's fibers basically coming off of your clothing. The same way if you had a black t-shirt, after 70 washes, it's not quite so black anymore. And that's a lot of the difference. And one way people say, oh, but why would I want to wear insect repellent? Because insect repellent's gross. It smells, it's yucky. I get it in my eyes if I sweat. One way to think about how Insect Shield is in the clothing, it's similar to the way that you're wearing a black t-shirt. So you put that black t-shirt on, you're not thinking about the dye stuffs that made that t-shirt black. You're thinking, I'm putting my black t-shirt on. You're not thinking, I'm going to take this t-shirt off and I'm going to, have my skin is going to be dyed black, or if I've got my red t-shirt dyed red. Insect Shield's bound into the fabric in the same way. So it lasts through, the life of the garment. The product is on the textile, not on your skin. And if you really think about it, there's no way it can last through 70 washes. And I'll go into later how we check that. It can't last for 70 washes and be effective and also be like washed out immediately. And so that's one thing with the pre-treated fabric products, that the permethrin is bound in, and you can be confident that it's in the garment and it will last for the life of the garment. And then we do also sell a spray for items that are not treatable, such as shoes, which we obviously for tick protection, having treated shoes is very important. We can't treat shoes in our system, but you can spray your own shoes, and it's something you would do once a month. And that will last for the month, and then you would just respray. So we talk about having the treated clothing that lasts forever and it's on the garment, but there are items that you want treated. Your shoes, maybe your backpack, because if you're out camping and you put your backpack down and ticks get on your backpack, and you can basically be given the ticks free ride up to your back and up to your head, where often they like to go if they can get that far. So we want to cover the whole basis. And the spray really is a lot for the tick protection. Obviously, mosquitoes and ants, different insects react differently. But focusing on ticks, you want to make sure starting from the bottom up is really critical. So we would recommend spraying your shoes and having treated socks and pants. And of course, the more insect shield you're wearing, the more protection you have. One thing people ask, this is probably more mosquito related, is there like a halo effect? Like, okay, if I'm wearing my insect shield, are mosquitoes going to come? Like, what are they going to do? And there is no official test for that, because the thing with insects is every person is different, especially mosquitoes. There's some people that, get bit by mosquitoes easily. There's some people like, they never bother me. Yeah. So, and every environment's very different. I'm here in North Carolina where we have a lot of insects. We have an office in Seattle. They don't have as many. So it's very hard to judge, like, what is a typical, insect situation. So one thing that we do know, and there's been studies done, that the more permethrin treated product that you're wearing, basically the more protection you have. So a flying insect like a mosquito, it may land, but then it'll get discombobulated and go away. Where a tick is different, because a tick actually has to crawl up and come into contact specifically with permethrin. And permethrin itself is really one of the best protectors from ticks. And because something, the permethrin, what they do, they call it hot feet, that the ticks get on the permethrin, and you can see there's videos of it, and you see a tick get up and they start to almost try to turn over. They want to get away. So then their mission from going to I want to have a blood meal to I just want to get off, the getting off becomes more a priority than having the blood meal.
That's helpful too. One question, going back to talking about spraying your own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think about that all the time. I've got a can of, whatever I've gotten at Target down by my boots and my shoes that stay on our front porch. Does the type of fabric matter? So tennis shoes versus my barn boots, will permethrin work on all of that?
Yeah, the thing that it will, the one thing is, if it's a fully water repellent, if it's really well, there's two things with that. If they are just pure rubber boots there's nothing that the permethrin can really bond onto. But the other thing is, I think some of those types of items are also really hard for ticks to crawl up, because there's nothing for a tick to latch onto. Yeah, so I think the main thing, if you're going to be spraying your own product, which we highly recommend, and the thing with sprays, I've got it, actually we're not video. The thing with the sprays is in our world, we recommend it for products that you cannot treat, that cannot go through, you cannot buy pre-treated. Or we also have a program where you can send your own clothing in for treatment, because if you have your favorite, outdoor gear, you want to have that with Insect Shield, we can do that. You can also spray your own, clothing, gear. One thing we were talking, because ticks are from the ground up, the first point of always thinking about protection is from the ground up. So if you have, say, rubber boots, the one thing with the spray, it needs to have something to hang on to. So if they're purely 100% waterproof rubber boots, the permethrin you make, it's only going to last for a little bit, because it will, like, the whole point of a rubber boot is to not let anything bond on. So to spray a rubber boot, it's probably, most of it's just going to come off, especially the first time they got wet. So maybe you would have some protection in the beginning, but once they got wet, it's all going to come off, because that's the design of rubber boot. So that's something to consider. So when you are spraying a shoe, it would be more like a hiking shoe, something you can almost see it absorb in. When you spray your product, you want to see it really get wet and then let it dry. And you can tell the parts that, if they got wet, but then the spray would just kind of roll off. The other thing with ticks, and I'm not an expert on this, but this part of it, but having seen a lot of ticks in action, for them to, they need something to kind of hang on to. And if you were wearing like a tall rubber boot and you did an experiment, I don't think a tick would be able to crawl up. The same, like, like an ant, like you wouldn't see them able to crawl up, because they need something to latch onto. If it's a purely smooth surface, I don't know if they could, that's kind of slick, if they could get up there. But then in that case, what you would do is, okay, if you have rubber boots, but then if you have your pants that are treated, and if you do spray your own clothes, which, is an option, the thing is, it'll last about 4 to 5 washes. So that's the main thing, the difference. One thing that's key with Insect Shield is we did not invent a new repellent. So as I said, permethrin's been around. We just figured out how to get the permethrin to stay on the fabric. So we're using something that's tested, proven, has an excellent safety record, but we just figured out how to get it on and to stay on. And that's what makes the process unique.
That's so fascinating. And so then I would imagine that is probably the biggest difference, aside from the toxicity in DEET and permethrin, that there is no bonding agent.
Well, DEET really needs to go on the skin. See, that's the difference. So DEET, gotcha. The way DEET works too, you have to reapply it, and because it's like a vapor pressure situation, and it needs to be on this. There's a way that it reacts on the skin. If you actually put DEET on clothing, from my understanding, it won't really work. Right. So the DEET needs to go on the skin. Permethrin needs to go on the clothing. And the thing with permethrin, it's not meant to go on the skin, because if you put permethrin on your skin, it'll basically just absorb in, which it's not going to hurt you, but there's no effect. So permethrin needs to have something to hold on to. So DEET, a lot of the reason people kind of have, I was fishing and I had my DEET next to my little tackle box that's plastic and my plastic melted, because there's a petroleum base to it. It's trying to stay on top of your skin as long as possible. Eventually, it dissipates and some of it absorbs into your skin, and then you have to reapply it. So it's always, 4 hours later, the bugs are back, I got to reapply. Where permethrin holds on to the textile. If you spray it on your skin, it just won't have any effect, because we don't have anything to keep it on top of the skin. There's nothing in the permethrin chemistry to keep it on top of the skin to work. So, in situations where you really are concerned, we always recommend, spraying any exposed skin. And there's DEET and there's, Picaridin, and there's other options out there. One thing to consider with insect repellent that we highly recommend, whichever one that you choose to use for yourself and your family, is you use one that's EPA-registered or CDC recommended. There are many natural repellents out there, and there's many claims made. And I'm sure some of them work, some of them don't. It's all about different people. But they do not have to prove anything. So there are statements that they made. There's no testing backup. The thousands of tests that we've done in labs with live insects to prove that what we say is true and is effective, and all the claims we make, we can substantiate with data and we can back it up. Yes, maybe lavender oil or tea tree oil, they can have effect for some people, but if you really need to protect yourself and you're really concerned, make sure you're using an EPA-registered, CDC recommended repellent, and that way you can be confident that they will work.
That's great advice. You had mentioned pets a little while ago. We didn't really go deep into that, but I'm just curious, talking about spraying this on fabric versus spraying it on skin, which isn't effective when you spray it on the skin, it sounds like. How about can you spray it directly on your pets? Or is that something that you want a product like a handkerchief or, bandana or something that has it on there? How would you use it with your pets?
Well, so that's it. Actually, permethrin is used in a lot of flea and tick applications. So if you buy Frontline or a lot of other ones, they have permethrin in them. So permethrin is commonly used. The spray that we have, again, is made for textile items. So you wouldn't use our spray on your pet, but if you go, if you're using a lot of the different tick and flea protectors out there, they're using permethrin. And that's another thing, just with permethrin, it's used like in lice shampoos. And so they're in certain scabies medicine. So it's something that it's around there, and that's when people are like, oh, it can't touch my skin. You can touch your skin, like I was talking about before, and it's used in different applications on the skin. So permethrin has a lot of wide-ranging uses. For pet products with Insect Shield, we do offer a collection of bandanas, little dog jackets, that type of thing. And a lot of we use the pet blanket, like we have a person blanket, same as the pet blanket, but a lot of people like to use the little blanket. So for pets, it actually falls under our gear products, and we can also claim repellency for fleas. So mosquitoes, ticks, flies, and fleas for pet product. So a lot of people like it just as a little extra. If you like wearing having your dog wear a bandana or a little neck gaiter, it doesn't hurt to also have it treated just for that additional protection. Because, as many people know, I mean, Lyme disease and other tick-borne disease are a big issue for dogs. So it's important, especially the ones that are, you get the extra fluffy dogs. It can be really hard to find ticks that get buried in there, and they can be quite dangerous.
Yes, I've wondered about it because we have I've got the dog you can see lying behind me, but we also have a farm dog, and she's got that double coat. It's like really, really thick. And we do flea and tick treatment on her and everything, but every now and then I find one on her, whether it's attached or not, because some of them they have to attach, I guess, and bite the dog. They can still bite the dog. They'll just die. But this is all so fascinating.
Mary, can you share a little bit more in detail about the knockdown testing and kind of how that came to be? Because we love that you guys are so driven by the data, right? Like that is an important piece of this, because a lot of companies can't claim that. Can you share a little bit more about what that involves?
Sure. And that's the big part of the, EPA registration is being able to say or to show that the claims that you're making, you can back it up with, scientific tests. So the knockdown was developed as a way to replicate or to really check how the textile and the insects react together. You cannot, human subject testing is can be tricky, and especially with insects. So it was a way needed to be developed in the lab that you could create and you could replicate, because with any scientific studies and testing, it has to be replicable in the exact same situation over and over and over and over and over again to have the data points. So the way the knockdown works is we take there's a piece of, there's treated fabric that is not washed. Usually we do a 0 wash, maybe a 25 wash, a 50 wash, a 70 wash. They take a Petri dish that has a little hole in it. They put the fabric in the Petri dish. Then they put mosquitoes in the Petri dish. It's interesting. They have a big kind of box that holds mosquitoes. They kind of suck them in through like a plastic tube into the tube, and then they have this little hole in the Petri dish, and they blow the mosquitoes in. So that's how they get the mosquitoes from the big box into the Petri dish. Or same for ticks, but ticks, they don't have to, they can pick them up with a tweezer. So there's the treated fabric. The insects are exposed to the treated fabric for 2 minutes. After 2 minutes, the fabric is pulled out. Then after 15 minutes, they check to see how many of the insects are knocked down. That could be dead, that could be not moving. Often with mosquitoes, like one of the legs will kind of fall off. So after 15 minutes, they say how many are knocked down. Then they check again after 60 minutes. That's the US test. So basically we can say, okay, these insects were exposed to this fabric for 2 minutes, and then we can just see what happens. Usually even after the 2 minutes, when you pull them out, you start to see them kind of not moving as much. But that way, it's a test that we can do each and every time the same way. There's a whole protocol. It's interesting, actually, for both mosquitoes and for ticks, it's only the females that are the biters. So they have to actually make sure there's only the female ticks, and the ticks have been, they're only a certain, their age is all set, how old they are, how many meals they've had, kind of how long they've lived. So there's a whole protocol. So again, it's all about replicating the same test over and over and over. So there's 2 tests we do. So we do a lot of knockdown to make sure that there's the effect of the permethrin against the insects. And again, the beauty of this, we know that permethrin works against all these different insects, but of course we're always checking to make sure, that everything is applied properly. So there's protocols in place. The EPA wants to make sure we're still doing our system as we showed we could do it from the beginning. And we're proving that what we say we do, our claims are valid. Then the other tests we also do what they call GC tests, which are just gas chromatograph. And that's confirming that the amount of permethrin is correct on the item. So that's kind of more your like CSI test, like, how much is there blood in this? And they figure out how much of the chemistry is on the item. So for example, we apply for all items, 0.52% permethrin is applied based on the item weight. So if you look on the back of any Insect Shield product, you'll see that there's the active ingredient is permethrin, 0.52%. And the other ingredient is the item, the garment, the blanket, the bandana, and that's 99.48%. So we apply it at that ratio for all items. So if you think about the weight of a t-shirt and then you add 0.52% liquid, it's really not very much. But the key is we need to make sure we get it all over the product, consistently. So it's not just like, I'm wearing pants and, one lower leg is treated. It gets consistently applied throughout. So you get full protection.
That is so interesting to me. I don't know if you know this, but my degree is actually in chemistry.
Oh, I didn't know. Yeah,
college, so I'm like, oh, the GC, I know about
yes. Yeah. So we do a lot of GC tests. So actually, and I don't think I mentioned earlier, we treat, product for consumers, for, people, for, us going out, for taking our dogs for walks, going hiking, going fishing, camping, obviously a lot of outdoor activity. We also work with the U.S. Army, treating their uniforms. We do a lot in the oil and gas industry. So a lot of folks that are going to places, this tends to be probably more mosquito related, but places where there's a lot of dengue fever or malaria, because they're really a lot of the operations, they're going to places that maybe haven't been underdeveloped, and they're going in and, to chopping down trees and into places where there's a lot of insects. So we do a lot with workwear. And a lot of that is also fire retardant products. So we can treat the FR clothing for those folks. We do a lot of utility workers here in North Carolina. Duke Energy is a big customer. And if you think about the work, any outdoor worker is exposed to, insects. And the thing that's happened in the past few years, obviously you all know well, but, just tick-borne disease and people really understanding it and knowing and seeing the ramifications of it on people. Again, this is where you all, are living it day to day. But in a lot of workplaces, they're realizing, there's a tick attachment. What do we do? Do they need to go to the doctor? How long was the tick on? Do we need to report it? Is it OSHA reportable? And then that affects, a lot of things. We did a study with the North Carolina Department of Forestry, and because they have a lot of workers out, doing in marshlands, doing different surveying, and they were having a huge problem with tick attachments. And they did actually a double-blind study, and the people that had the fully treated product, it was like 99% reduction in tick attachments. So we're trying to also work with a lot of those types of agencies, because going to work is a very different thing than, I'm just going to go for a hike, or, I'm doing my leisure activity to protect people that's their day to day. And if they have to go on antibiotics or they get sick from work, that's also brings in a whole nother component to tick-borne disease.
Yeah. And putting yourself at risk for your employment. Yeah. Those are great statistics, though. 99% reduction.
Yeah.
That's the kind of numbers you want to hear, right?
Exactly.
changing gears just a little bit, I'd
Yeah.
love to go back and talk to you a little bit more about Insect Shield. One of the things that jumped out to us, to Candace and I, as we were, we've been reading your website for a long time now, but you guys there at Insect Shield support so many wonderful organizations that fight against Lyme and tick-borne diseases. Can you share a little bit more about that with our listeners?
Absolutely. And actually, it's a relatively newer initiative in the past few years. When we first started, it was all about mosquitoes. Globally, we were involved in a lot of public health efforts. And between malaria and Zika virus and that was the news. And that was where, we could do a lot and we could help a lot. And then back then, Lyme disease, people were talking about a little bit. We actually were trying to work with some summer camps and how do you protect the campers, and it's, okay. It wasn't top of mind, and it wasn't in the news. And then really in the past few years, when, it became so much more, such a bigger issue and so much more kind of discussed and acknowledged. And we knew we had a product that was great for it. We actually, since the beginning, have been working with the Tick Encounter Resource Center out of University of Rhode Island. So we've been a big supporter. They've been a big supporter of us, and we've been a big supporter of them from the early days. But we never found a lot of other traction with a lot of just kind of tick-borne groups. And so in the past few years, we were finding more traction, and we found that there was just a lot of there wasn't a lot of great information out there for people how to protect themselves. There were groups that were saying, okay, like trying to help just more emotional support, or like, I think I have Lyme disease, I don't know. And there was a lot of just kind of misinformation. So as a company, we decided a few years ago, okay, malaria and these other diseases, we can still help support in certain ways, but they're not really US based. We're a US based company. I mean, we do a lot globally, but within the US, this is something that we could really make an impact on. So we decided to kind of pivot and really say, okay, let's focus on tick protection. Let's really get involved. Let's spend our resources on helping educate. And because the Tick Encounter, Dr. Tom Mather, who runs that, we sponsor his group. He helps us get out education, and we've really made it one of our main focuses is to say, like, can we be experts in also just educating people about ticks, what they do, kind of how they act, and then how to protect yourself on the other side. Insect Shield as a company has always been just, one of its missions has just been kind of global health, public health. And so we have a product that can make a difference. And we have decided to really put that effort now into helping with tick-borne disease education and prevention and protection.
Which is so important, right? Because as you're talking about this, I keep thinking about something we hear from the alpha-gal community is that people are terrified to go back outside.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in my opinion, as being, Debbie and I both live here in Southwest Virginia in the mountains, we're surrounded by hiking, by trails. Like, nature is just so important to us and our families that it breaks our heart to hear that people don't want to get back outside. So I think it's so important that these initiatives are happening to encourage people, to get back outdoors, but to have a plan, right? To be prepared. Can you maybe share with us like what your protocol would look like for going and getting back outside?
Absolutely. And again, that's you just nailed it, Candace, because that's exactly like what we want to help people with. We found there'd be news articles about protect yourself from ticks, or ticks are out there, be vigilant, and then it would just say be vigilant. It's like, not like, well, what does that mean? Right. So, and it's not just, yes, you could, of course, still always, checking yourself for ticks, but before you're going out, yes, what you would want to do, and what I do, and what all of us at Insect Shield, and especially now, the more and more we learn about tick-borne disease. So as I mentioned earlier, ticks start from the bottom. They do not fall out of trees. They could maybe get into some taller grasses. So you hear about deer but so deer are one carrier of ticks. The others, but there's really mice are probably what I've learned through the years. They're the biggest that can carriers of ticks. So ticks are going to be hanging out low because they want to get onto something to have a blood meal. So they're going to be kind of in the grass. So what we recommend, I guess talked about earlier, spraying your shoes, wearing treated socks. Dr. Mather always also recommends tucking your pants into your socks because as the ticks are always going to crawl up. So the thing with having permethrin and permethrin treated socks and pants or clothing is they don't want, like I talked earlier, they don't want to be on the permethrin treated product. So as they start crawling up, if they get past the shoe, and then they get to the sock, at that point, a tick is tiny. So they're not going to make it that far up. So you want to always be thinking ground up. And if you are walking in a trail, staying in the center of the trail, because again, the ticks are going to be on the grasses, or they're going to be inside the trail. Of course, that's not always possible. So, for full protection, we would definitely recommend pants also. And then just really, so after coming in, checking yourself, because Dr. Mather, there's a lot of great videos that he has and we've done with him, but ticks want to get to like a nice cozy spot. So a lot of times it's the back of the knee, it could be the groin area. If they get all the way up, it could be the underarm. But using a product like permethrin will just dramatically reduce the chance of a tick getting on and then actually attaching. And this is the key. I was reading a study from the CDC with permethrin treated product. And because we were trying to figure out if a tick gets past the sock, like, so say they get up and they get past the sock, but then what is will they attach? And in this study, they really determined that just having kind of a 1 minute exposure to permethrin, it just kind of 90% reduced the chance that if it got up, it could attach. So there's what is the permethrin doing? It's discombobulating the tick that much that it cannot then focus on actually attaching and getting the blood meal. It needs to get away. So permethrin is just by far an amazing, an easy way to protect yourself. And again, if you're using the spray, if you're using the treated clothing, it's not on your skin. You aren't worrying about, any kind of, misuse or overuse. It's on the product. It's a really easy way to protect yourself. And if you really are super nervous, which I completely understand people being, then, having a whole outfit, we recommend spraying your shoes once a month. If you want to spray them every other week, that's fine. If you feel like they got wet, or spraying them every week. But just some really easy ways to go out and still enjoy and know that, permethrin works. It's tested, it's proven, it keeps ticks away.
I think that information will give a lot of people peace of mind because you've got products that are actually deterring ticks, killing ticks, knocking them down, I guess, preventing them from being able to attach, even if they make it to your skin. That's a lot of reason to use these products when you're going outside. And it's a lot of reason to try them so that you can go back outside, right? So.
Yeah, and then the other thing, if you go just one further, because absolutely enjoy going outside, if you do find a tick on you, I think the main thing though, then if that happens, don't panic. Make sure you know how to remove a tick properly. And there's a lot of videos that'll show you. You have a special tweezer. Save the tick. So this can actually also add a lot of peace of mind. You can take a picture of the tick. And one thing, even Dr. Mather at the University of Rhode Island, if you send him a picture of the tick, he will tell you what kind of tick it is, how long it's been attached, and potentially what types of germs that tick may carry. If you still want more information, you can even send your tick in to places like Tick Report, and they will do a DNA test on that tick and tell you what germs it is carrying. So information is, knowledge is power. So if and if you know what type of tick, how long it was attached, which germs it could be carrying or what germs it was carrying, that can also help you if you do start to feel strange, or you're having some, concerns with, your diet, or you're seeing the bullseye that they talk about with Lyme disease, that can really help, I think, have peace of mind. So if you do find a tick afterwards, it's not like, don't panic, because if you have that information and you can know, the sooner you can, then take the next steps to making sure you're okay. The other thing that's critical, all ticks carry different diseases. So like alpha-gal is from the Lone Star tick. The deer tick cannot, give you alpha-gal syndrome. So, and the Lone Star tick does not carry Lyme disease, or cannot give you Lyme disease. So I think a lot of people just think it's a tick. It's, I've got Lyme disease, or I could have alpha-gal syndrome. They do not realize that there's just many different types of ticks, and the different ticks carry different diseases. So having that knowledge, knowing, okay, I was bit by a deer tick, this could not transmit, I could not have alpha-gal syndrome from this, or this is a Lone Star tick, I could not have Lyme, is also important. So the next step of, if a tick attaches, the world is not over, but let's figure out and take time and save the tick. That's the thing. A lot of people will just, if you do the picture, then you can put the tick in the freezer. And then if you do decide you want to send it in, you can send it in at a later date.
That's great advice too. Especially the piece about don't panic, because what we're hearing is that there are resources out there for determining, if, God forbid you're bitten, there are ways to figure out how at risk you are and for what. We had a friend who sent me and Candace a picture of a tick. She said she'd found one on her and it was attached to her back. And I guess the dog had gotten into the grass, and she ended up finding several more in her bed. But she sent us this picture, and Candace and I immediately were like, that's a Lone Star, and had the white, but she sent it off to be tested, and she was not at risk of getting alpha-gal syndrome from this test. And I think all that story to say that you shouldn't panic. Right. Figure out what you're looking at first and go from there. Well, Mary, we have one last question for you.
Sure, yes.
One of our favorites. And we know from our conversations with you that you're also a music lover, just like Candace and I are. So one of our favorite questions to ask our guests is there a song or an artist, I guess, that brings you joy in this moment or for all time? If there's a song that has been your favorite since you were little, that's a good one too. But we find too that this shifts a little bit. So sometimes it's classic rock, sometimes it's R&B, you never know. So,
I know, as a listener of your podcast, so from the beginning, I've known this question. Then when you asked me to be on, I was like, okay, I know 100%. I had no doubt. So Bill Withers, It's a Lovely Day. That's, I think, I just love that. It's any time of day, anytime you need it, if you're happy, if you're sad, it's just, you can't beat that song. So that's my pick.
That's a great choice. Love it.
Thank you so much for being here. I think that this information is so impactful. We love Insect Shield, everything you guys are doing, from the product to the education and awareness. It's huge. So we will attach all the links to everything that you mentioned from Tick Encounters so that our listeners can get all of that really fantastic information. And we hope that we can have another conversation with you soon, Mary. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on.
All right. Until next time. Thank you for joining us today on In the Tall Grass. Visit us at 2alphagals.com. That's TWO alphagals.com. Or you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at 2alphagals. If you enjoyed listening, please leave a review and help us grow this community.
We're all faced with obstacles on our journey, whether it be food allergies or tick-borne diseases. You might outgrow the reactions, but you won't outgrow the person you become. Ticks suck, but life doesn't have to.